What I'm going to focus on today is blogging. But before I get into that, quick show of hands. Who reads blogs? Who reads blogs? Okay, good number of you. Who writes blogs at the moment? Oh, pretty good. And who wants to write blogs but doesn't at the moment? Yeah. Okay, great, good. So we've got a good mix. Quite a few of you reading, some writing, some wanting to write. That's really useful. So, quick bit about me. I work for Policy at Manchester, as Olga said, which is the university's policy engagement arm. We're really all about trying to get more of the university's research and expert knowledge into policy. I've been a journalist in my early career. I've written pretty much for a living most of my life in some shape or form. And in 2013, I was involved in setting up Manchester Policy Blogs, which Stephen referred to, which is an outlet for our primarily our academics, but also now external contributors to contribute on topical policy issues. That now has over 120,000 page views per year, have about 250 authors, and is growing all the time. So that's, I guess, why I'm kind of being asked to come here today and talk about blogging. This isn't going to be a philosophical debate about the pros and cons of blogging. I'm pretty sold on blogging, and I'm going to hopefully convince you by going through 5 reasons I think as early career researchers and academics you should be looking at blogging. Maybe it's not now in your career, but I'm going to argue that actually it's something that at some point you should definitely look at, and we'll see whether you agree with me. I see lots of positives in the work I do. No one's ever come to me, I don't think, and said that was a dreadful experience. You know, not all blogs get many views, but no one's come and said that was a complete waste of my time. That was horrendous. Why did you try and talk me into that? But I'm not an academic, so perhaps actually at the end, if we've got a bit of time, I'm interested in your views, those of you who do blog. What's your experiences? What are your fears? What are the pitfalls? So I think that'd be interesting. So I'm going to get into my 5 reasons. I'm going to start with a film. My first reason for you blogging is that actually it can be great for your career and your impact, which Stephen mentioned. But don't take my word for it. Let's have a watch of a video.
Lights. Get me a light. Thank you. How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? I'm speaking to you for the University of Manchester, and those viewers of an academic bent might find the story I'm about to recount somewhat surprising. These notices herald some of the most momentous events in one young academic's career. Ah, here he is now, Dr. Gabriel Seles Brugger, ladies and gentlemen. Give the folks at home a wave, Gabe. Yes, folks, this is the story of how a few well-chosen little lads took this diligent young academic from an office here in Manchester to the corridors of power and beyond. And let me tell you this, it all started with a blog. It all began when Gabe and his colleague were researching a paper on international trade agreements and spotted something amiss.
These TTIP figures, they're all wrong. Gadzooks, I think you're onto something. These numbers are deeply flawed. This is gold. We should certainly include it in our paper.
Now, conventional wisdom would have been to wait until their paper was complete. But no.
No, the government are vastly overestimating the benefits of this agreement. We need to tell the world. We should write a blog.
He's going to do what?
A blog? Who on earth is going to read that?
Oh, my dear boy, no. I mean, it's hardly serious writing now, is it?
But this is important. People need to know. It is important. It could have far-reaching implications.
Now don't you listen to all that fluff and nonsense from that old stick in the mud. If folk need to know, then you're the man to tell them. Now go to and start writing.
And that's exactly what they did. And I'll tell you something else, folks. It raised a few eyebrows too.
Gadzooks, I think they're onto something.
And by Jove, they were onto something. The blog immediately garnered hundreds of views. Fairly soon it was being reposted all over the web and getting noticed by NGOs.
Gadzooks.
There were letters to governments and articles in major national newspapers, all quoting our young academics' research. And soon enough, people wanted to speak to the man himself.
What I'm saying, Andrew, is that TTIP is being wildly oversold.
On the back of one little blog, young Gabe's research was gathering momentum indeed. But it doesn't stop there, folks. No, not by a long shot. Next, it was the Royal Society of Medicine. Then it was Rome for the conference on an alternative economic policy in Europe. And then it was the Beeb again. TV this time. And then straight on the plane to
Washington.
You where?
Washington, D.C. I'll be home tomorrow.
Well, make sure you are, my love. London have been on the phone. They want you to give evidence before a common select committee.
Gadzooks.
That's right, folks. All the articles, all the appearances, and all those conferences have led our young hero from humble beginnings to the palace of Westminster itself, the very heart of power, where his ideas might influence policies that could be truly world-changing. It's a story worthy of a book. And what do you know if they haven't written one? And just remember, folks, it started with a blog.
Okay, so that's all a true story. That's Gabriel Sears Brugger, who was an his TTIP, transatlantic trade, was his area. He started blogging for us about 3 years ago. Just it was starting 2 or 3 years ago. Just it was starting to come into the public consciousness, and that all did actually happen. We obviously applied some creative, kind of application to that. But that did all happen. That's a true story from a blog. Many things came. It was great for his career. He ended up getting invited to various conferences that he probably never would have got invited to, all from a few hundred words. And it was opportunistic. We were lucky in some ways. I think that it was topical and it took off in the right way. But there you go. That can happen. And we see, he was slightly further into his career, perhaps than some of you. He got promotion fairly soon after at another university, so it certainly did him good. And we do have PGR students actually who blog for us, who some of their work's been quoted in parliamentary publications. It happens. So my contention number one is that it can be great for your career and your impact. Reason number two for blogging. Stephen, you touched upon this slightly as well in your presentation. A blog's got more chance of being read than a PDF. Why do I say that? Well, there was some interesting research a few years ago from the World Bank, 2014. They publish a lot of reports, which are intended to inform public opinion. So they decided to take a look at actually the extent to which that was actually effective. And when they actually looked at it, so they reckoned that 50% of their reports had an objective of informing the public debate. But what they actually found when they looked at the download figures was that 1/3 of their PDF reports had never ever been downloaded at all. 40% had been downloaded fewer than 100 times, and 13% around 250 downloads or less, fewer than 250 downloads, which the Washington Post described as a pretty lousy track record, and I think they'd probably agree with that, but good on them for doing it. I'd argue that actually a blog, in terms of getting a message across, in terms of an output, trying to engage with someone, yes, there is still a place for reports, I don't deny that, but in terms of if you're looking to really engage outwardly, blogs have got something that, they can be shared easily on social media, they're concise, they're accessible, they can be read quickly, and if someone's interested, it can lead them into reading longer reports. But I think for me, that's why the blog's got the advantage. One thing I observe a lot is that so this is a key point, whether it's pizza or policy expertise, everyone Googles, including people who work for policymakers and researchers in the external world in Parliament. this is what they do. They tell us this. This is what they tell me. They'll just do a quick Google, and what you tend to find is that blogs and web pages will come up much higher when someone searches for something like that. So that's the actual first page search result for that query. And because we don't have a lot of people blogging on health devolution, it's right on our doorstep. We've got a lot of people looking at that, as some of you may know. That comes out very strongly in search engines. So there's another advantage of blogging over PDFs. But PDFs still have a role. Our third argument why you should blog. Blogs are like white dwarves. Any astrophysicists in the room? Because I'm going to come unstuck here, probably. Right, I'll carry on. I'll plough on. When I was looking for a metaphor here, I came across this. So the white dwarf cyclically brightens and dims and then awakes, erupting in a nova, stellar nuclear explosion on its surface, causing the white dwarf to get far brighter. The process slows and eventually starts all over again. So I've observed that blogs actually quite like white dwarfs because they can have when you write them, they can have an initial peak, initial spike of interest, and then they can kind of go quiet for a while. And then all of a sudden, because of something happening in the external world, it becomes relevant again, and someone might pick up on it, and all of a sudden you've got this explosion. So I thought that was quite a good metaphor. I was quite pleased with myself there. No one's corrected me, so it's great. We have some examples. So this is one of your colleagues, Stephen. Maybe Stephanie still here?
No, she's actually at Manchester Metropolitan.
Oh, is she? Okay. Obviously, it's done her good. She's moved on. So she wrote this great blog for us on inequality in the criminal justice system. Really well-read blog back in 2015. Did pretty well at first, and then sort of bumped along, sort of as you'd expect. And then all of a sudden, in the last year or this year, we suddenly noticed this blog really doing really well again. And you can see these are the Google Analytics. We had a look at what was happening, and sure enough, around end of November, December 2016, so last year, all of a sudden there's a huge spike in page views, daily page views. And what we think happened around that time was as Stephen will probably know, the David Lammy, I think it's like interim findings into inequality in the criminal justice system. And we haven't been able to source what exactly it is, why that spike's happened, but we're pretty sure that's the reason. And so there's something that's become incredibly topical again. Someone has clearly cited that blog in some literature or in a newspaper somewhere. We've not been able to find it, but that's a great example of how it has what we call a long tail. Blogs have a long tail. They're not just here today, gone tomorrow. They can have longevity and deliver over time. So reason number 3, blogs are like a white dwarf. Reason 4, I'd argue it can inform and enhance your research. Darren Coyle, who's our current co-director, eminent economist, always, I've heard her say, you learn more when you speak to the outside world. Why would you want to keep your work, internal and just within your own circles? You'll actually get something back if you go out there and speak to people. So she's a big pro blogger. Colin Talbot as well. Let's go back. Colin Talbot, who's our old co-director, was a big advocate for early career researchers of blogging because it allows you to test out ideas, get feedback from your colleagues, from your peers. So he was a big supporter. In terms of examples that I've seen, again, I think it's another colleague of yours, Stephen. This is not by design. It's always just by coincidence. But so this was a blog that I think had the potential to have some of those critical comments, some of those unhelpful comments that Stephen talked about. You could have seen things like that here, but actually, to Lindsay's credit, what she did, with some fairly sort of throwaway comments at the start. I mean, nothing offensive. We obviously got a moderation policy, but Lindsay actually started to engage with this in a way she was sort of almost developing her argument. I felt, in terms of responding to these sort of comments and honing her argument. And we actually, it turned into an actual a bit more of a useful conversation. Other people joined in, and they actually got a bit of a debate going. And Lindsay might tell me differently, but to me, actually, the way she engaged with that that was probably quite useful for her in some ways, for her research, you know, putting that out there. See, you know, there's people here who are Irish themselves, who are, you know, kind of responding with their experiences. So, so I think that's a really good example there of how it can benefit your research. Final reason, for quickly whiz on some practical tips for you, and then questions. It can help develop your writing skills. You know, there's quite a lot written on the benefit for you if you're looking to, you know, do a lot of writing, academic writing. It gets you into the habit of writing for a start. You know, it allows you to help you find a voice. Sometimes your own academic voice, your own style. It's a sort of, you know, especially if you've got your own blog, it's somewhere that you can sort of experiment, you know, without actually being too much out there in the public arena. Word limits, you'll find if you're blogging for general audiences, you'll have word limits to contend with. So the conversation, which some of you may read or know, they're very strict on their word limits, 800 words. You'll get edited down, or they'll tell you to redraft things if you go over that. So, you know, obviously, as you know, things like writing abstracts, presentation for conferences, you'll have time limits, word limits. It's all, I'd argue, good practice for that kind of academic practice. So, those are my 5 reasons, and we can talk about perhaps some of the downsides if you want to, or some of the things that might not be so rosy about it. But I wanted to sort of say, you know, it's a bit on getting started if this is what you want to do. I think you need to think about, do you want a personal site, or, you know, so is it about you just experimenting a bit and having your own site to start with and just doing, you know, what you want to do, be a bit more experimental, or do you want, is there something burning that you want to talk about? Do you shout at the radio? Do you shout at the newspaper? Do you shout at the TV? And because you know something they're saying is factually incorrect or isn't quite the whole picture. If that's the case, you really want to engage with the debate, I'd say you might want to look at a third-party blog, someone else's blog, to help get your message out there. Have something interesting to say. No one really wants to read a boring blog, you know, so it's got to be, you know, test it out on a few critical friends maybe. Look at what makes a good blog. What do you like about blogs that you like, that you read, that makes it interesting? What about it makes it good? You know, and try and learn from that. Topical hooks all the time, you know, if it's the external world you're looking to engage with, you know, look for what's in the news, look for things like, just pick this out of the air, Universal Children's Day is coming up. If you were doing work on your primary education, if you were doing work on, you know, inequality, etc., etc., you could find things to hook into Universal Children's Day as a topical event. Grab your reader. You've got probably 5 seconds, especially if you're pushing your blogs out via Twitter and social media. I used to hear a lot when I worked in media relations from journalists who said, your press release lands in our inbox, we give it 5 seconds, if it doesn't grab us, we delete it. It's pretty similar with blogs, I think, these days. There's so many. Another example, Stephen, it's just, you know.
I hope there's a blog about that I've done for you up there.
Yeah, there will be. It's just, you know, it's in the it didn't quite make the cut. Yeah, so this one, you know, I was fortunate to be able to work with the authors on giving them a really hard-hitting title. I helped them and we advised on that. That did really well. It got, you know, you can see the social media kind of, you know, sort of impact there. Good hard-hitting title will do you a lot of good. For Policy at Manchester, yes, we're really keen to get new contributors writing on your areas of expertise. It's got to have a policy slant to it for us, really. 800 to 1,000 words. Some sort of, I suppose for us, policymakers tell us what we don't want as a central conclusion or a point is more research is needed. It's no good for them. It might be true, but for them, that's not something they can really use. And event reports, kind of he said, she said, then this happened, then we had tea, and then, you know, we had this session. Great, but it's not very interesting to read for the outside reader. You can turn it, you can get things out of events and make them into good blogs, but probably not just in a linear way. We have a lot of page views per year. We've got a big Twitter following, LinkedIn as well, that we use to promote our blogs. So if you're interested, look up Manchester Policy blogs, and it might be a place for you to cut your teeth. That's it from me. we've got a bit of time for questions, hopefully. But I'm interested in hearing from you as well about what might be a barrier to blogging, what are your risks, your fears, and what have been your experiences. Yeah, so thank you.